Night. Well, it is only Tuesday, and what a week it has been already. Carl Paladino is running a collision course down the campaign trail as Andrew Cuomo tries to capitalize on all the controversy. Now, all of this has provided plenty of fodder for conversation. Not that my next guests are ever at a loss for words. They are our insiders, political analysts, who rarely mince their words. You know them well by now, but I will tell you who they are. Bob Bellafiore is a former press secretary to former Governor George Pataki. He's now with the charter school organization National Heritage Academies. And Steve Greenberg, across the table, a former press secretary to two former Assembly speakers. He's now a pollster for the Siena Research Institute. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, as always.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you guys.
You bet.
So Carl Paladino, he this afternoon has decided to apologize for his latest gaffe. He says he sincerely apologizes. He's made mistakes in his life and he wants to apologize for them. He basically is saying that he's sorry for what he said about gay people. Do you believe, A, that he means it, and B, it will work?
Well, I don't think there's anything Carl Paladino has said in the last several weeks that isn't what he thinks. And frankly, that's been his problem, is that he's probably said too much what he thinks. He's been too unregulated. If anything, he might be the least handled, orchestrated candidate we've seen. He was making some headway, it seemed, on the angry at Albany thing, tapping into the angry voter, but then he just got completely off his message and seemed to have no rhyme or reason or strategy for what he was saying. I mean, best articulated, but my 14-year-old gets up from the breakfast table this morning and looks at the paper and says, what's he going to do next, start slapping babies? I mean, a teenager understands that he's got no strategy, and that he's going counter to what any smart politician would ever want to do to get elected.
Steve?
Well, first of all, I would take his apology for what it's worth. I accept when people offer apologies. I hope and assume that it was heartfelt and that he meant it. He clearly offended a lot of people, and he did so at a time that was particularly bad, given the events in the Bronx last week and the events at Rutgers the week before. So I hope he meant it. But I think the bigger issue, and Bob alluded to it, the bigger issue is that Paladino really has gone off, it appears, from a public point of view, gone off the deep end a lot of late. And I think what we're seeing over these last 10 days to 2 weeks is that Carl Paladino has probably done more to help Democratic turnout across New York State over the last 10 days than any Democratic candidate for office in New York has done over the last 10 weeks.
See, this is amazing because actually the LGBT community was not so psyched about Andrew Cuomo. They were not thrilled with him. He is not going to, or he wasn't going to. Now he's apparently going to stop by. The Empire State Pride Agenda's Big Fall fundraiser, that's going to be happening on Thursday. And now, of course, people are just running to him, even though he's sort of not exactly on the front burner with gay marriage, with other LGBT issues.
But what it is, what Carl Paladino is giving Democratic base voters, people of color, Jewish voters, women who care about the choice issue, gay, lesbian voters. He has given those voters who didn't otherwise feel a need, per se, to come out and vote in the gubernatorial election because they thought it was a given, they weren't all that excited about Cuomo, whatever the reason, he has now given them fear. And there is no better motivator for voting than fear. And these communities are now suddenly getting excited about voting. And this long talked about Republican enthusiasm in the electorate this year and a Democratic enthusiasm gap, I think we may start seeing that evening out a little bit.
You know what, we've also seen this happen a little bit nationally. I mean, what started out as sort of these really exciting Tea Party candidates turned into candidates who just took it a little too far. I'm thinking Christine O'Donnell and the whole witchcraft thing, for example, or any of these other candidates who just went just a little bit further than they should have.
Well, you know, George Pataki said it best a couple of weeks ago at the Wall Street Journal thing, which is Carl Paladino has to take the voter anger and translate that into policies that will matter to people. Now, Pataki was great at doing that when he ran in 1994, and Paladino just never got past that. And then when maybe he got tired of just, you know, politicians feel like they need to sometimes they feel like they need to say something different because they're tired of saying what they said. And Richard Nixon had a great line, which is just when you said something so many times, you're about to get sick. It's the first time the voters have ever heard it. And every politician should remember that. Palladino just got totally off kilter.
But with Pataki, wasn't it more that he provided a viable alternative to somebody that everybody was tired of with Mario Cuomo? It was the ABC. It was the anybody but Cuomo vote.
Yeah,
but
even still, he always frustrated the press, but he had tremendous message discipline in each of the 3 races that he ran.
That's true.
He knew what he wanted to talk about, and that's what he talked about. And he had the ability to engage the people, and when they were upset about something, he could articulate what they were upset about.
It was anybody but Cuomo. You're right about that, Liz, but Bob's also right because he did not give them a reason to suddenly jump back into the Cuomo campaign, to the Cuomo candidacy and vote for Mario.
Right.
He said taxes, death penalty, welfare. I mean, those were the 3 words that he kept saying throughout all of the '94 campaign. So voters had a reason to say, okay, I'm pissed at Cuomo. I'm not going to vote for him. I can vote for this guy. Now there are people who are maybe saying, gee, I don't know that I really want to vote for Andrew Cuomo, but I'm not sure I can vote for this guy.
And when you're starting from a Republican in New York, where you're outnumbered 2-1, you want to try to depress the other guy's turnout.
Yeah.
Right? Al D'Amato was better at this than anybody. He used to go millions of dollars in negative ads to depress the other guy's turnout, to make the other guy look unlikable. And then people would vote for Al.
That's what Andrew Cuomo did right out of the box after the primary. He hit those airwaves, and he hit them extremely hard. And he's done all of these ads that are very deft, right? There's Andrew Cuomo. They started out with all this sort of swelling music. And Andrew Cuomo, he's a fighter. He's a this. He's a that. He's got this great record. Carl Palladino, and then he defines him, right? Because Andrew Cuomo had, at one point, now he has 19 million. It was 23 million.
Right.
And Carl, that's still more than the 10 million that Carl Palladino has not yet spent that he said he was going to spend.
Well, not so much after the primary, but after the Quinnipiac poll. You
Right.
know, that poll that showed it with 6 or 9, which I never believed for a minute. No, but it was a poll that gave Carl Palladino an opportunity to create the perception that he had a campaign that might be able to make some inroads. And then from that moment on, he is completely screwed up.
Well, regarding the polls, actually, tomorrow we're going to have some congressional polls coming out from you, and we're going to be able to see what kind of effect, if any, this Palladino factor is playing in the races. But moreover, these races have all of a sudden blown up. We had a former president here for 2 of them yesterday. We're going to have the vice president here for Tim Bishop in Long Island coming up in a couple weeks. Clinton back for Mike Arcuri in New York 24. I mean, what's happening?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that look, Bill Clinton remains one of the most popular political figures in New York State, and in many other places of the country, but certainly in New York State. The Democrats are concerned about a handful, maybe a handful and a half, of congressional seats around the state that they fear they could lose to the Republicans. They're calling out the big guns. I'm not surprised that we saw Clinton this week in the Hinchey race and the Maffei race. Those are probably not quite as close as some of the other races.
Right.
And I think what you're going to see is Clinton coming out as we get closer. Remember, we're still 3 weeks from Election Day. As we get closer, I think you'll see him in, as you mentioned, Arcuri. I would not be surprised to see him up in the North Country in the Owens seat or the Murphy seat in the Capital Region.
Because you hold back your heavy artillery until voters actually remember, much to the Nixon point where you say it again and again and again. You want those voters to remember Bill Clinton saying vote for whoever he's got his arm around on that day.
Right. And if it's a fall, the only way there's going to be this time of the year and Bill Clinton's not campaigning would be if he was in traction. And even then, I think they'd wheel him around with his leg in a cast. And he loves to stump for candidates.
He's good at it.
So there's one. 2, the other thing, don't forget this. He's married to somebody who's still ambitious with a future. And every time he goes out and does a favor for an elected official, a member of Congress, is a chit in Hillary's side.
Wait, do you think she's actually going to replace Biden in 2012?
You might have the wrong half of the ticket.
That is an interesting prediction there, Bob Bellafiore, and totally off what we were supposed to be on. Sorry about that. Steve, you wanted to say something?
Not about what he just was talking about. No, not at all.
Well, let's talk about our gubernatorial race, because actually we're going to have this debate on Monday. It may very well be the only debate that we see between the gubernatorial candidates. It's all 7 of them. That should be something. Now, your guy, actually, were you still with Pataki in 2002?
Yes.
And he did this very same thing. It's a very interesting move to debate everyone. Right, everybody on the ticket, everyone.
Yeah, well, if you're the person in the lead, you want to dilute the crowd, so it's not just a two-person race, and you don't give more profile to the person who's most likely to be able to challenge.
Although it's ironic here, because you're right, that's the classic political strategy. But what we saw this time was Andrew Cuomo wanted to do it as the front runner, but Carl Palladino was also insisting that all the candidates be included in the debate. He was the one saying, Andrew, do you want to kick out the only woman? Do you want to kick out the only African American? So from a political strategy point of view,
Palladino, though, means less time for him to actually make any errors. Now, the man has never debated before. We've seen that he has problems staying on message. He's not disciplined like George Pataki or even disciplined like many other elected officials that we've seen and candidates. So you think that he's probably going to rely on maybe Charles Barron, the New York City Council guy from Brooklyn who's running on the Freedom Party, maybe Kristen Davis. We saw Warren Redlick was here yesterday. He's not going to do any attacking, he says, but you know, maybe he will hope that some of these other people will, you know, dirty Cuomo up, Pataki. I'm 4 years away, 8 years away, however many years I am. It's, you know, he's hoping they'll do the dirty work.
You know, I think ultimately for the vast majority of voters, for the 97% of voters who are going to vote for either Carl Palladino or Andrew Cuomo, that's who they're focused on. Yes, you will have these 5 other candidates, and they do deserve their due since they are on the ballot. But based on history, we know pretty well that none of them are getting any significant votes. And I think the voters really want to see Palladino versus Cuomo. So my personal hope, even though I think this is likely to only be the only debate, is I would like to see a second debate just between Palladino and Cuomo.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I want to see the cable ratings Monday night to see who gets better ratings, Kristen Davis or her Client 9.
Oh, why? Is Client 9... Oh, that's right. That's right. Of course, Parker Spitzer. Well, now, you know, it's never been proven. There's never been any proof of that. I know what the claims are, but, you know, I'm just saying. So here's the question. Who's going to win the debate? Quickly.
Andrew Cuomo will win the debate because he won't say anything. I mean, you know how I feel about debates. I think they're largely shams.
Yes. Yes, I think we might have heard that.
Which is why he never watches any of them.
So I don't watch them. I think Andrew Cuomo will win the debate because he'll be the leader. He's far and away the leader going in. He'll be far and away the leader coming out.
I think there's no question that Andrew Cuomo will win the debate. The real question is, will Andrew Cuomo win the expectations that he has or that those have in him going into the debate? Will he outperform what people expect him to beat up on Palladino and to way outclass him in this debate? Will he live up to those expectations? And that's what he'll be measured against.
He just needs to let Carl speak, and he'll be fine.
Well, we shall see. And actually, you better watch because we're going to be catching up with you afterwards. So you're going to force yourself, okay?
Yes,
and thank you, Bob Bellafiore, for joining us. Also, Steve Greenberg. As usual, it's always fun. And still to come on Capitol tonight, Democrats currently hold 26 of the state's 29 congressional districts. But we're actually seeing action in a dozen of those seats, including 2 more yesterday. We'll be breaking down the congressional landscape after the break with CQ's senior elections analyst, Bob Benenson. That's coming up next.